shit that's not ready. That was quick. Myself comfortable. I have the most important audience member. Alright, I've been prepping for like 3 minutes now. I think we're okay. Y'all should be able to hear me just fine. I'm not really testing my audio. I'm just kind of going for it. That's a bit precarious. I don't know how I feel about that. We'll do this for now. So what do I want to start with? That's a good question. I don't fucking know. I don't know. I guess we'll go... Yo, Smiles, what's up? Smiles, you're here! I thought you had game nights on Fridays. Wait, is today Friday? Oh my god. Okay, no, it is Friday. Oh man, I thought I was stupid for a second. No game tonight, people couldn't make it. Ah, I see. Well, I'm a sore replacement for D&D, anyone can tell you that, but hopefully we make the night a little bit brighter. Hello? Hello? Is anyone there? Inner demon, I'm here. No shit, Sherlock, I was asking about people who mattered. Inner demon, oh, goes to cry in the corner. God. Oh, there have definitely been DID days with that as the theme. It's like, is anyone in here intelligent? And then Rat'll pipe up and be like, I can kind of think. And Snake's like, no, not you. Oh, okay. To be fair, though, if Rat had any more jobs, I don't know how he would make it, to be honest with you. Especially since he's been running so much shit for so long. It's crazy he's not even sassier than he is. How you doing, Chaos? Alright, Chaos is here, so we're obliged to do some Texan. Is there anyone here who uses their brain? No, you're on Facebook. Oh, yeah. Pretty much. Yup. It do be like that sometimes. It really do. Yeah, how you guys doing tonight? I'm sorry I've been so dog-tired for the past, like, week. Shit for work has been getting crazy. And it's only getting crazier. I should start relaxing around July. But my field season is May and June and, like, the first bit of July. And so I will be doing field research shit for that time. I should still be able to stream. I might stream earlier, but I'll still probably stream. If I stop streaming, I'm gonna lose my goddamn mind. So I'm pissed at you for showing the new Batman movie. Why would they get pissed at you? Isn't that your job? Like in a spoilery way, or I don't know. Like, chaos literally works at a movie theater. So, like, if they went and signed up for a movie and then got upset about being spoiled, that would be impressively dumb. You know, Thunder Kitty. But I say that, but people continue to shock me with how fucking stupid they can be. Because they couldn't understand if it was a Batman movie or a continuation of Twilight because Robert Pattinson is in it. What a weird conversation. So they got mad at you? The movie is literally called The Batman. Yeah, like, you didn't do the casting, for Christ's sake. You just show the movie. Also, I don't like Robert Pattinson. He gives me the creeps. I don't like his face. I know that's probably a little mean, but I don't like his face. Yeah, but to be clear, Robert Pattinson was a crappy vampire. It took him 14 years to turn into a bat. The only, like, offbeat thought I can come up with, a vampire plus man equals Batman. I mean, bats are associated with vampires. There is something called a vampire bat. But they usually feed on, like, cattle and shit. And they're also really nice to each other. Like, if one of their homies are starving, they'll give up part of their meal to feed their homie, because if they don't eat for 3 days, they will die of starvation, because their metabolism is real fast. And so, the bats remember who gives gifts, and if that bat is having trouble, they will return the favor. They're pretty cool. I like bats. I know that's not a burb fact. I guess that's a bat fact. But it flies. Dunks. She was 15 years younger than me? This might have been her first Batman movie. 15? Was she old enough to see the Twilight movies in the prime? Because, like, those came out, like, a while ago. Hi, Zerp. I'm 35, so 20. Oh, okay. So, like, right at the cusp. I just rewatched Batman and the Dark Knight this week. Oh, nice. Oh, right, you were telling me that you were watching the Dark Knight while I was getting my ass kicked in Mahjong. Zerp. Did you know? Oh, come on, I had a bird fact earlier today. Why can't I think of it? Can I replace a bird fact with a cool thing I saw two birds do today? Can I cash that in? Or it's gotta be a bird fact? She must have. She looked like she'd read 50 Shades religiously. Oof. Technically also a bird fact, so yes. Yes! Okay. So, the place where I hike has a few, like, birds that they keep outside. They can't be released back into the wild because they've had accidents that they, like, can't heal totally from. So, this place has two turkey vultures, right? Big dark birds with bald red heads. And what does she smell like? And so they keep these two huge turkey vultures in an enclosure. And most of the time, like, I see them, they're like preening or like sunning themselves in the sun. They have like their wings kind of wide open, or they're flying from perch to perch. But today, they were being cute. First, when I walked up to them, one of them cocked their head like a dog. Like, you know how dogs, like, cock their heads to the side? Like, when they're, like, looking at you or listening to you? One of them did that, which you wouldn't think it would be cute for a vulture to do. But, like, it was adorable. It was so cute. And then the other vulture, who was in the shade, flew up next to that bird. And, like, they started looking at each other, like, cocking their heads at each other. And then they touched their beaks to each other. And, like, snuggled. It was so cute. I was just like, you guys are adorable. I want to know more about vulture behavior. Because it was so cute. Like, aww. Like, they were just being cute today. And okay, vultures are cool. Like, I'm a big fan of vultures, so, like, I would definitely say vultures are cool and they can even be beautiful. I would never think I would call them cute, but here we are. Vultures are cute. Oh, here's a burp fact. Did you know that when vultures get stressed out, their self-defense mechanism is to throw up? And because they eat, like, dead and rotting meat, the scent of their throwing up is so vile that it apparently sufficiently protects them from harm. Unless, like, they get hit by a car or something. Then that doesn't help. But yes, if they get anxious, they throw up. Fuck yeah. Yup. So, vultures are cool. Especially our vulture. I mean, fair. Yeah, like, they're... Like, once you understand more about their biology, they're a little derpy, not gonna lie. But they're so cool. Alright. So, I'm gonna give you guys choices. I don't know how to give you choices. Say they're cute when one flies full speed into your windshield. Did you have a vulture fly full speed into your windshield? Well, I gotta hear this story. How the I mean, I once had to, like, stop in the middle of the road because one decided to land right in the middle of the street, and I drove up and I was like, whoa, you're huge. And I just sat there for 2 minutes. I was like, I'm not gonna rush you. You're fine. When I was a kid, one did to your dad's truck. Oof. Oh, that's an oof. Is it time to tie a pole again? Yeah, that's what I was thinking, sir. Let's do it for old time's sake, yeah? Some memes never die. Alright, so straw pole. Alright. Do we want to start with... Oh, I'm an idiot. I didn't realize there's a command for it. Pole. Open up a setup menu. Okay. Which spook first? Okay. Texas, China, Ireland, or I could see if I have anything for vampires. Vampires? Okay. No, I'm not gonna make people pay money to vote. Fuck off with that. It wanted me to have you guys spend bits to vote. You can fuck off with that shit. Wow, 2 votes for China already. Also, if y'all have any like requests like Lovecraft or Poe, you can just shout it out in chat and I will get it. I already throw enough random money at you. Please no. Please no. Please do not. Also, that funny sound was request queue. What the fuck is a request queue? Oh, I'm an idiot. That funny sound was me almost kicking my laptop off my desk. Because I'm reading... I don't have 2 monitors, so all of my stories and all of, like, chat, I'm reading on my laptop. Which is that huge machine you hear me, moving around. Oh, we got 1 vote for Texas. Y'all are gonna tie it. Motherfucker. I shouldn't be surprised. You know, I thought for a second that maybe. Fine, alright. First, there's never a tie when there's a vote for water. God damn it. Yeah, oh, well, Zerp, alright. There was no water. I voted for water. God damn it. Y'all want water? I'll give you water. Come on. Where is it? Da-da-da-da. I know I have an underwater thing somewhere. Ah, here we go. There. Is that enough water? I have a Water Creepy story. It's not new. Hey, if you want it, just send it over. But, yeah, let's start with Texas. And then... Hold on. I gotta... Here we go. Okay. Like sitting at the bottom of a swimming pool. Yeah, that is actually that is surprisingly spot on for what one of the stories I recall Chaos writing as being. There's a website for background noise. Zerp, I've been doing this for like more than half a year. Yes, it's called a soft murmur. Oh God. Okay. Hold on. Let me hook you up. Soft murmur. It's free. How did you never know? I'm not sure how you didn't know. Okay. So, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start off with Texas. Then we're gonna go to China, which is a really strange way to do things, but fine. Oh. But first, we're gonna do Chaos' story before we touch any of that. Oh, I remember this one. This one's a good one. Texas and China, huge in the tech industry. You love this? Go to Zerp. There are a whole bunch of YouTube videos that do ambient sound as well. But because my sound settings are so jank now, so that I can listen to music that you guys can't hear while streaming, because I have that on for anxiety. Because I have that whole setup, it makes doing things a lot harder, because I only have ad block on Chrome and not on Edge, and I'm not sure how to get it on Edge, because who the fuck uses Edge? But yeah. Texas isn't really super tech, just a lot of guns. Guns! We're a little gung-ho. Nah, Chaos, you stay right here. Alright, so this is Chaos Dragoon story. This is part of his Twisted Tales collection. This one is called Live Out of These Waters. Mary let out a relaxed sigh as she allowed the water to cradle her. She loved when her two boys spent the night at her friends and her husband had his silly magic games with the guys. When everyone was out of the house, she could relax in the pool all by herself. Sure, the pool was good for family barbecues, exercise, and getting the kids away from whatever fortnight it was. However, she loved just relaxing in the water, letting it take her from one end of the pool to the other. Bubbles broke the surface next to her head, but she paid them no mind. She knew it was just the lovable ladybug pool cleaner cleaning the bottom of the pool. Another set of bubbles breached the surface, and a thought popped into her mind. We should get a hot tub. She pictured a medium-sized gazebo with glass walls and a glass ceiling, so she and her husband Tommy could sit in the bubbling water during cold winter nights and look out into the starry night sky. A smile formed on her face as she pictured the scene, as the third round of bubbles broke the surface next to her head. Wow, must have found a large patch of grime down there, Mary said to herself before adding, I'll have to remind Tommy to get more chlorine the next time he goes out. An arm suddenly came out of the water and wrapped around her neck before dragging her down. She let out a gasp before being submerged. Two legs wrapped around her waist as she sunk deeper into the pool. She began clawing at the arm wrapped around her, but found no give as her fingers felt like they were digging through gelatin. Strands of yellow pus floated in the water around her as darkness began to creep in the corners of her eyes. She let out a gasp as water rushed into her throat, and darkness fully took her. Hours passed by before Mary finally came to. The world around her sounded muffled as she slowly opened her eyes. When she moved her arms, they felt heavy, like a weight was strapped to each limb. When her vision finally cleared, she found she was lying on the floor of the pool. She sat up and gasped, expecting water to rush into her throat. But she found she could breathe underwater. She got to her feet and kicked at the floor to ascend to the surface. When she breached the surface, she looked around and found that it was already morning. She turned to her house and saw Tommy at the bay window washing dishes. She quickly waved her arms and tried to call out to him. However, no sound came from her mouth. She saw him look out, but it seemed he didn't notice her as he went back to washing dishes. She quickly swam toward the edge of the pool, but when she placed her hand outside the pool and onto concrete, her arm was immediately engulfed in flames. She screamed in pain and shock before she retracted her arm and submerged it into the water. She winced in pain before she examined her arm. She saw the flames had already charred her skin, but soon the skin began repairing itself. She looked back at the bay window, and her eyes widened. A figure had stepped out of the shadows and stood next to her husband. The figure was an anorexic woman, with pale, rotting flesh. Some parts of her flesh were rotted to the point where it was showing bone. Atop her shoulders was a horse head, with the same rotting flesh. Its right eye was missing, and from its open eye socket leaked yellow pus, while its left eye had a white film over the pupil. Its bottom jaw was missing, and in its place were 2 long spider fangs. Mary began splashing and waving, trying to get Tommy's attention while she tried to yell. But once again, no sound came from her mouth. Tommy looked at the figure and seemed to laugh like it had just told a joke. He then kissed the figure on the forehead, as he did to Mary every morning. She felt her stomach churn as Mary began to dry heave. For several minutes the water rippled as she continued to dry heave. When she finally stopped convulsing, she took long breaths. When the water stopped rippling, her blood ran cold. She stared at the reflection in the water. Gone was the tall, tan redhead with freckles dotting her skin. The reflection staring at her mirrored the figure standing next to Tommy. She looked back up at the bay window to find the figure now hugging her 2 boys, Andy and Benjamin. She'd had enough of this and suddenly lunged out of the pool. As soon as her bare feet touched the concrete, her whole body was engulfed in flames. She let out a shrill scream as she stumbled and flailed her arms around as the flames began melting her skin. Her flesh peeled and turned red as she felt her right eye begin to melt in its socket. The water in the pool rose up in tendrils and shot toward Mary. They wrapped around her body and pulled her into the pool. The flames extinguished as the water began dragging her down toward the pool floor. Her skin began repairing itself as her right eye began to grow back. It was apparent she couldn't leave the pool. When her eye finally grew back, tears started to form in her eyes. She curled up into a ball and began to sob. She couldn't leave this watery purgatory. For the next couple days, Mary simply saw her family interact with the figure like they didn't see or smell its rotting flesh. At times, when she couldn't see her family, she simply floated in the water or swam around the pool to keep from being bored. Every now and again, she attempted to leave the pool, only to be engulfed in flames. It was worse when her family swam in the pool. The water seemed to pull her toward the bottom and hold her against the floor as they swam. She couldn't reach out to touch or even get their attention. Her two boys, who always dived down to see who could reach the bottom first, never acknowledged or even shown that they saw her there. She cried out to them. All she could do was watch as her family went on without her, as they spent their lives with that thing. One day, when she woke up, she saw the tarp of the pool. She quickly swam toward the surface and tried to press the tarp off. She recoiled in pain as her hands felt they were pressed on a hot burner of a stove whenever she touched the tarp. She could no longer see her family, no longer see if they were safe with whatever that thing was. Her days were now filled with her swimming back and forth or simply lying face down in the water, watching the ladybug pool cleaner putter around the pool bottom. Mary knew the seasons were changing and the pool would be forgotten until summer. After several weeks of her normal routine of swimming and watching the pool cleaner, Mary noticed a small silver puddle at the bottom of the pool. She swam closer to it, knowing it was never there since her imprisonment. She slowly reached out and touched the puddle. Her hand went through, causing her to recoil. She examined her hand and found no pain, no burning skin. Was this the way out? Mary asked herself before she placed her hand in the silver puddle. She took a deep breath and crawled into it. She found herself still in the water, and she let out a frustrated sigh. Then she noticed the bottom of the pool. It was different. She instantly knew where she was. 3 years ago, their neighbor, Adam, decided to build a pool for his wife's birthday. He bought all the supplies and made her a massive pool. Since she loves Hello Kitty, he got pink pool tiles and arranged them at the bottom of the pool in the shape of the Hello Kitty logo. This pool was the inspiration for Tommy to build their own pool. But he wasn't the best at arranging tiles and wanted to arrange them in the form of a heart, but it came out looking like a pine cone. Mary stared at the Hello Kitty logo at the bottom of the pool, amazed that the silver puddle led her here. She then heard splashing and looked up to see Adam's wife Susan skinny dipping. She knew Susan swam back and forth several times before she laid on her back and stared up toward the night sky. The water wasn't forcing her down toward the bottom. Instead, something was compelling her to swim up toward Susan. She felt her body slowly swim toward her, as a voice not her own echoed in her mind. I want to be where the people are. I want to be part of their world. Gosh, it's always so eerie. This is why you don't swim at night. I've actually done some swimming at night. It's not bad. I have had nightmares, though, of, like, strange women. This is not even, like, me being tongue-in-cheek. This is legit. Like, I've had some nightmares of, like, being in, like... But it's always an indoor pool, which is weird. Like, being in an indoor pool, like one of those hotel pools with, like, the lights in the walls. Being in one of those at night and, like, some strange woman, like, drowning me. I don't know what that's about. I won't get into any more details about it because it's a little rated R. But yeah, that's a thing. The cycle continues. Yep. The cycle continues. Alright, you got your water option. You happy? You good? Oh, this is another... Wow, I have a lot of underwater things. Nope, fuck that one in particular. Oh, okay, no. That's there. What's this one? That one's good too. I didn't realize I had so many of these. Okay. And let me go to the mixer. Recurring nightmare? Yep. I have a lot of weird recurring nightmares. I think the one that takes the cake is... And I still get it sometimes, but I used to get it much more often. When I was a kid, I would be in this infinite web of Q-tips. Like... geometrically connected Q-tips, like, you know those, like, ball and stick chemical models you see? Like, them made out of Q-tips going infinitely in every direction. Front, back, left, right, down, up. It was just infinite array of these Q-tips. And then, like, you're just there, just, like, trapped in this web of Q-tips. And, like, it's just Q-tips. It's, like, all white. And then, as the nightmare is ending, the background turns black, and you just see a relief of, like, billions and billions of these latticed Q-tips. And then you wake up. And you're like, what the fuck? What the fuck? The fuck? What, why? Why? What is this? Why? So that's one of them. I have other recurring nightmares that I acquired later in life. A lot of that is PTSD and CPTSD and other shit. Those are more like they've got their roots in trauma. So those are not as fun. Well, no nightmares are fun. A lot of weird. I have like recurring nightmares of being like in a burning building, and then like the burning building turning into like this weird time portal thing. It's weird. I get a lot of weird recurring nightmares. Some of them, like, just... Some of them are, like... I can't even begin to describe them in a way that is, like, decent. Just crazy shit. Yeah. But... recurring nightmare of... that happening. I'm sure there are more. And I have these really pleasant recurring lucid dreams too, where like I would be flying above things and I could control how I flew and like where I went. Those are my favorite dreams. Alright, but anyway, Texas. Texas, 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 Texas. Texas, 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 Texas. Texas, Texas, Texas. Go find it. Where the fuck is it? Oh, there we go. Here's some Texas. Found Texas. Alright. This one is called The Old Bridge from Camden. Old man McMahon was the foulest-tempered fellow you'd ever did see. He owned and operated a sawmill over in Camden, and nobody in the town liked him one bit. I had to deal with him, though, since his mill was the only one in town. He was an ornery cuss, as touchy and stubborn as a mule. Whenever anyone didn't pay time or crossed him, he'd take out his horsewhip and flail at them until they ran away cussing or broke down crying. Sheriff warned McMahon a couple times about it and threatened to call in the Rangers, which calmed the old man down a bit. He was still a mean one to deal with. One evening, McMahon was riding around when a coyote scared his horse and it bolted. McMahon was thrown down next to the bridge by the sawmill, and his head broke right open. Died instantly. Folks in town said all the right things, of course, but there was a general sigh of relief when the sawmill was taken over by a nice fellow who moved to Texas from Kansas with his pretty wife and 2 kids. Aaron thought they'd seen the last of ornery old McMahon until one night when Jerry Jones, a man whom McMahon had particularly hated, decided to make his way home via the old sawmill bridge after a long night of partying at the tavern. Jerry was halfway across the old bridge when a plume of steam came rising up through the boards of the bridge. Jerry stopped his humming, meandering stroll and stared at the mist as it thickened and became a whirling column that pulsed green and white like a mad thing and made his eyes water. Then it solidified into the translucent, glowing green body of old man McMahon, with a popping sound that made the bridge reverberate. The specter flourished his whip at poor drunken Jerry, who screamed in terror and went back running, the way he'd come with the ghost hard on his heels. Green light spilled everywhere as the ghostly blows rained down on his head and shoulders for more than a mile. When Jerry reached the giant pecan tree that shaded the road, the ghost of old man McMahon vanished at once, with another popping sound. At first, no one believed Jerry's story, his reputation for drink being what it was, even though he swore on a stack of Bibles that it was true. But once McMahon's spirit emerged from the grave, he became quite active. The ghost challenged the local parson when he tried to cross the bridge Sunday evening on the following week. He only backed down when the preacher pulled out his Bible and recited scripture. Later that summer, McMahon tackled a huge blacksmith on the way to court a sweetheart, and the two wrestled for a bit before the blacksmith managed to tear the whip away from the glowing green figure and toss it into the stream. After that, folks started avoiding the bridge at night unless they were called out in an emergency. Even then, they took the precaution of wearing amulets and carrying Bibles around and whatnot, hoping it would keep the ghost away. Worked sometimes, but not always. The situation went on for nigh on 20 years, until after the First World War, when more families in town could afford to own a car. Those cars could whip over McMahon Bridge at 15-20 miles an hour. Too fast for the ghost of McMahon to catch him. Sometimes folks would see his glowing green form stand up beside the bridge and waving his whip, but he never caught any of them. Folks figured the ghost would give up haunting the bridge after the town got so modern. But old mean McMahon still had one last hurrah on him, and it was a doozy. The local football team was driving home in the bus one night after winning a big game. Boys were whooping it up plenty, to the chagrin of their teachers, when all at once the bus stalled right in front of McMahon's bridge. Well, the boys started joking around about the ghost until they noticed that the road outside was glowing green. The boys nudged one another nervously and then turned to look out the rear window of the bus, right into the twisted smile of old man McMahon. The boys started shrieking, and the teachers chiming in just as loud, and the ghost of old man McMahon lifted up the back of the bus as if it weighed no more than a rabbit. The team tumbled out of their seats, screaming and praying. The football coach bravely climbed up the sloping aisle, waving a fist at the ghost and the strange pulsing green light. Just then, the sheriff came roaring over the bridge on the opposite side of the road. As soon as his headlights illuminated the ghost holding the bus, old man McMahon vanished with a popping sound. The sheriff slammed on his brakes in shock as the school bus crashed to the ground. The boys went running out the door at top speed, followed closely by the teachers and the bus driver. It took the combined efforts of the sheriff and the football coach to round the panicking students up and load them back into the bus, which was suddenly back in working order. One long after this event that they had built a new highway, the old bridge was torn down. Ghost of old man McMahon hasn't been seen since. And this is why you should fear crotchety old men. They might become a ghost and fuck with you for many years to come. 20 years? Jeez, that dude had a grudge. That dude had a grudge. Alright, China. Let's see. Good old China. There are so many. I'm going to try to avoid the ones... There are some risque ones in here. I think... Yeah. Okay. We'll do Freak Wind. Here we go. The Dajing military camp was based in Liangzhou at Mount Song, in the middle of a gravelly desert. The site was that of an old battlefield. And one day, General Ta Siha led his troops further into the desert on routine surveillance. As far as the eyes could see, the landscape was barren, spotted here and there with low scrub, and disturbed only by wisps of yellow dust. Suddenly, a huge mountain reared up from the ground, eventually blocking out the sun. As it rose before them, the terrified soldiers and their startled horses could hear tremendous crackling and thunderous roars. General Ta was just as frightened as his men, particularly when he noticed that the mountain was advancing towards them. It approached so quickly that there was no hope of escape. So the men leaped off their horses, formed a tight circle, closed their eyes, and waited for the worst. Seconds later, they were engulfed in pitch darkness. The men and their horses were knocked to the ground and tossed around mercilessly by this dark force for quite some time. But eventually all was calm again. The entire troop of 36 men emerged, covered in blood with little pebbles embedded in their skin, some half an inch deep. When they turned to look at the departing mountain, it was already dozens of miles in the distance. That evening they returned to Dodging Base Camp and reported this phenomenon to the Chief of Staff, Ma Chong-hu. Ma laughed at General Ta, saying, "That wasn't a mountain. It's just a freak windstorm. You'd all be dead now if it had really been a mountain." This sort of windstorm occurs quite regularly out there during the winter months. You've all survived the storm, but it's obviously your faces are badly pockmarked with flying stones. The scars will probably be permanent. So, I suggest you make sure the troop's personnel records are updated to incorporate these changes to your men's appearance. Wow, what a dick. You didn't tell them? What a dick. I mean, yeah, I guess, but I mean, there's not much he could do about it. That one is a short one. Let's do the Muddle-Headed Ghost. That was kind of funny, though. Oh, this is another short one. Alright. In 1774, during the reign of the Qianlong Emperor, a young rascal by the name of Han Liu was detained in the capital on charges of beating and injuring his father. The Board of Punishment investigated the case, and it was decided that Han Liu should be executed. One of the deputies of the board, however, was of the opinion that since the attack had not been fatal, the death sentence was not appropriate. He was overruled by the Chief Justice, Mr. Chin, who personally wrote a memorial to the throne arguing that the relationship between father and son was sacred, and Han Liu had committed a grave sin by injuring his father. Liu. Not Liu. Liu. The throne upheld the death penalty and furthermore sent the Board of Punishment Secretary, Mr. Li Huaizhong, to supervise the execution. 3 days after the execution, Han Liu's ghost possessed Secretary Li and said, "All of the other officials were prepared to forgive me, but instead you insisted on having me executed. I've carried this grievance to the grave, and now, as a ghost, I have resolved to take your life." Everyone who heard this ranting was shocked at the ghost's muddle-headed understanding of the debate surrounding his execution. But they were completely powerless. Li was bedridden from that day on, and it wasn't long before he had passed away. Oh, so he had it backwards. He had it completely backwards. Well, oops. Yeah, the Chinese ones tend to be quite short or quite long. It's hard to tell which when you start them. Alright. Where to next, chat? You guys still awake? Nah, I'm half asleep. Good. Alright. Anyone have any requests? We got Edgar Allan Poe, we've got Lovecraft. Usually I wait for Sassy to do Poe, because I know Sassy is a fan of Edgar Allan Poe. And I wouldn't want her to miss it. We do have Lovecraft. We have stuff from Ireland. We have some Native American stuff. I've got some more American stuff, too, actually. Pennsylvania, Ohio, a whole bunch of places. Oh. It's an oxy! There we go. Rather partial to Lovecraft and Native American. Alright, so let me do a quick Native American one, and then we can jump into the Necronomicon. Just because Lovecraft, his stories tend to be longer, so I want to make sure. Let's see. Let me see. Any particular tribe? Iroquois, Pawnee, Choctaw, Blackfoot, Crow. I don't have Lenni Lenape. I'm still trying to find that. Oh wait, hold on. I have a huge ass file. Blackfoot or Crow? Easy. I could do that. You said Blackfoot first, so that's what I'll do. But I might have said Blackfoot first. Okay. Blackfoot or Crow, because I have both. We'll go Blackfoot? Sweet, okay. But now you know what I have the next time you're here, so you know what I've got in my library. Alright, so let's do many muches. Oh yes, I've got a lot. And if I don't have something you want, tell me and I can find it, especially if it's in advance. I'm going to just scroll at random because this book is so badly formatted that I can't figure out what the titles are. Alright. Oh, this one looks good. Okay. This one is called How the Thunderpipe Came. And I'm gonna change the background again. Let's see. Hold on. I know I have lightning somewhere. Here we go. You have heard the thunder, for he is everywhere. He roars in the mountains, and far out onto the prairie is heard his crashing. He strikes the high rocks, and they fall to pieces. A tree, and it is broken in slivers. the people and they die. He's bad. He does not like the high cliff, the standing tree, or the living man. He likes to strike and crush them to the ground. Of all things, he is the most powerful. He cannot be resisted. But I have not told you the worst thing about him. Sometimes he takes away women. Long ago, almost in the beginning, a man and his wife were sitting in their lodge when thunder came and struck them. The man was not killed. At first he lay as if dead, but after a time he lived again, and standing up, looked about him. He did not see his wife. Oh, he thought, she's gone to get wood or water. And he sat down again. But when night came, he went out of the lodge and asked people about her. No one had seen her. He looked all through the camp, but could not find her. He then knew that the thunder had taken her away. And he went out on the hills and mourned. All night he sat there, trying to think of what he might do to get his wife back. When morning came, he rose and wandered away, and whenever he met any of the animals, he asked them if they could tell him where Thunder lived. The animals laughed, and most of them would not answer. The wolf said to him, "Do you think that we would look for the home of the one we fear? He is our only danger. From all other enemies we can run away, but from him no one can run. He strikes, and there we lie. Turn back, go home. Do not look for the place of that dreadful one." The man kept on, and traveled a long distance. At last, after many days, he came to a lodge. A strange lodge, for it was made of stone. Just like any other lodge it looked, only it was made of stone. This was the home of the Raven Chief. The man entered. "Welcome, friend," said the chief of the ravens. "Sit down there." And he pointed to the place. Soon food was placed before the poor man. When he had finished eating, the Raven Chief asked, "Why have you come here?" "Thunder has stolen my wife," the man answered. "I'm looking for his dwelling place, that I might find her." "Are you brave enough to enter the lodge of that dreadful person?" asked the raven. "He lives near here. His lodge is of stone, like this one, and hanging in it are eyes. Eyes of the ones he has killed or taken away. He's taken out their eyes and hung them in his lodge. Now then, dare you enter there?" "No," answered the man. "I'm afraid. Who could look at dreadful things and live?" "No man can," said the raven. "There is only one old Thunder fears. There is but one he cannot kill. It is we. It is the ravens. Now, I will give you some medicine, and he shall not harm you. You shall enter there and try to find among those eyes your wife's. And if you find them, tell the Thunder why you came and make them give it to you. Here now is a raven's wing. Point this at him, and he will be afraid and start back. But if this should fail, take this arrow. Its shaft is made of an elk horn. Take this, I say, and shoot through the lodge." "Why make a fool of me?" the poor man asked. "My heart is sad. I'm crying." He covered his head with his robe and wept. "Oh," said the raven, "you do not believe me. Come outside, and I will make you believe." When they stood outside, the raven asked, "Is the home of your people far?" "A great distance," said the man. "Can you tell how many days you've traveled?" "No," he replied. "My heart was so sad, I did not count the days. Since I left, the berries have grown and ripened." "Can you see your camp from here?" said the raven. The man did not answer. Then the raven rubbed some medicine on his eyes and said, "Look!" The man looked and saw the camp. It was near. He saw the people. He saw the smoke rising from the lodges. He saw the painting on some of the lodges. "Now you will believe," said the raven. "Take, then, the arrow and the wing, and go get your wife." The man took these things and went to Thunder's lodge. He entered and sat by the doorway. The Thunder sat at the back of the lodge and looked at him with awful eyes. The man looked above and saw hanging many pairs of eyes. Among them were those of his wife.
"Why have you come?"
said the Thunder in a dreadful voice. "I seek my wife," said the man, "whom you have stolen. There hang her eyes."
"No man may enter my lodge and live,"
said the Thunder, and he rose to strike him. Then the man pointed the raven wing at the Thunder, and he fell back on his bed and shivered. But soon he recovered and rose again. And then the man fitted the elkhorn arrow to his bow and shot it through the lodge of stone. Right through the stone it pierced a hole and let the sunlight in.
"Wait,"
said the Thunder.
"Stop. You are the stronger. You have the greater medicine. You shall have your wife. Take down her eyes."
The man cut the string and held the eyes, and his wife stood beside him.
"Now,"
said the Thunder,
"you know me. I have great power. In summer I live here, but when winter comes I go far south. I go south with the birds. Here is my pipe. It has strong power. Take it and keep it. After this, when I first come in the spring, you shall fill this pipe and light it, and you shall smoke it and pray to me, you and the people, and bring the rain which makes the berries large and ripe. I bring the rain which makes all things grow. And for this, you shall pray to me, you and all the people." Thus the people got their first medicine pipe. It was a long time ago. It was a good story. I liked that one. Thanks, Miles. Alright. And now for Lovecraft. I enjoy native stories a lot. Me too. I like their way of telling stories and narratives and stuff like that. I have quite a few books in my collection of native stories already. I just keep forgetting I have them, so I don't read them on stream. But if you want more of them, make some noise. And if you watch the VODs, you'll definitely see me recite them. Alright. Let's see. I know we've done Dagon. Alright,
Choose one of the following. Fish Daddy Dagon, oh yeah. Choose the Nameless City, the Dunwich Horror, or oh man, oh, I just saw it. Or At the Mountains of Madness. I think I've not done any of those three. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do do do. They're all good choices. I think the last one I read was Dunwich, so I want to go Nameless City. I don't think I've read Dunwich yet. Let's go Nameless City, though. The Nameless City. Yeah, and I'll change it to something more Lovecraftian here. Da 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 da. It's like technically cosmic horror, right? So. Do 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 do. Da 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 da. Oh, I know what the symbol is, so I need to unsubscribe to that. I did not know. I did not know what that symbol meant when I first got it. This one is cool. I don't need it now, though. What's the storm? No, that's not quite it. There's one I have in mind. This ain't it. Is it this one? No. Similar to that one. I think it's this. Yeah, this is... No, that's not it either. God damn it. I'm sorry. Hold on. Being a little bitchy perfectionist about this. Is it this one? It really could just be this. No, this is it. There we go. Okay. Sorry, I'm just gonna rearrange some shit so that I can lean back as I read this, because my... There we go. The Nameless City. When I drew nigh the Nameless City, I knew it was accursed. I was traveling in a parched and terrible valley under the moon, and afar, I saw it protruding uncannily above the sands, as parts of a corpse may protrude from an ill-made grave. Fear spoke from the age-worn stones of this hoary survivor of the deluge, this great-grandmother of the eldest pyramid. And a viewless aura repelled me and bade me retreat from antique and sinister secrets that no man should see, and no man else had ever dared to see. Remote in the desert of Araby lies the Nameless City, crumbling and inarticulate, its low walls nearly hidden by the sands of uncounted ages. It must have been thus before the first stones of Memphis were laid, and while the bricks of Babylon were yet unbaked There is no legend so old as to give it a name, or to recall that it was ever alive, but it is told of in whispers around campfires, and muttered about by grandams in the tents of sheiks, so that all the tribes shun it, without wholly knowing why. It was of this place that Abdul Azhared, the mad poet, dreamed on the night before he sang his unexplainable couplet. That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange aeons even death may die. I should have known that the Arabs had good reason for shunning the Nameless City, the city told of in strange tales but seen by no living man. Yet I defied them, and went into the untrodden waste with my camel. I alone have seen it, and that is why no other face bears such hideous lines of fear as mine. Why no other man shivers so horribly when the night wind rattles the windows. When I came upon it in the ghastly stillness of unending sleep, it looked at me, chilly from the rays of a cold moon, amidst the desert's heat. As I returned its look, I forgot my triumph at finding it, and stopped still with my camel to wait for the dawn. For hours I waited, till the east grew grey, and the stars faded, and the grey turned to roseate, light-edged with gold. I heard a moaning, and saw a storm of sand stirring among the antique stones, though the sky was clear, and the vast reaches of the desert still. Then suddenly, above the desert's far rim, came the blazing edge of the sun, seen through the tiny sandstorm which was passing away. And in my fevered state, I fancied that from some remote depths there came a crash of musical metal to hail the fiery disk as Memnon hails it from the banks of the Nile. My ears rang, and my imagination seethed as I led my camel slowly across the sand to that unvocal place, that place which I alone of living men have seen. In and out amongst the shapeless foundations of houses and places I wandered, finding never a carving or inscription to tell of those men, if men they were, who built this city and dwelt therein so long ago. Their antiquity of the spot was unwholesome, and I longed to encounter some sign or device to prove the city was indeed fashioned by mankind. There were certain proportions and dimensions in the ruins which I did not like. I had with me many tools, and dug much within walls of the obliterated edifices, but progress was slow, and nothing significant was revealed. When night and the moon returned, I felt a chill wind, which brought a new fear, such that I did not dare to remain in the city. And as I went outside to the antique walls to sleep, a small sighing sandstorm gathered behind me, blowing over the grey stones, though the moon was bright and most of the desert still. I awaked just at dawn from a pageant of horrible dreams, my ears ringing as if from some metallic peal. I saw the sun peering redly through the last gusts of a little sandstorm that hovered over the Nameless City, marked the quietness of the rest of this landscape. Once more I ventured within these brooding rooms that swelled beneath the sand like an ogre under the coverlet, and again dug vainly for relics of the forgotten race. At noon I rested, and in the afternoon I spent much of the time tracing the walls and bygone streets, and the outlines of the nearly vanished buildings. I saw the city had been mighty indeed, and wondered at the sources of its greatness. To myself I pictured all the splendors of an age so distant that Chaldea could not recall it, and the thought of Sarnath the Doomed that stood in the land of Nar, and mankind was young, and of Ib, that was the carven of grey stone before mankind existed. All at once I came upon a place where the bedrock rose stark through the sand and formed a low cliff, and here I saw, with joy, what seemed to promise further traces of the antediluvian people. Hewn rudely on the face of the cliff were unmistakable facades of several small squat rock houses or temples, whose interiors might preserve many secrets of ages too remote for calculation. Those sandstorms had long since effaced any carvings which may have been outside. Very low and sand-chalked were all the apertures near me, but I cleared one with my spade and crawled through it, carrying a torch to reveal whatever mysteries it might hold. When I was inside, I saw the cavern was indeed a temple, and beheld plain signs of the race that had lived and worshipped before the desert was desert. Primitive altars, pillars, and niches, all curiously low, were not absent, and though I saw no sculptures or frescoes, there were many singular stones, clearly shaped into symbols by artificial means. The lowness of the chiseled chamber was very strange, for I could hardly kneel upright. But the area was so great that my torch showed only part of it at a time. I shuddered oddly in some of the far corners, for certain altars and stones suggested forgotten rites of terrible, revolting, and inexplicable nature that made me wonder what manner of men could have made and frequented such a temple. When I had seen all that the place might have contained, I crawled out again, avid to find what the temples might yield. Night had now approached, yet the tangible things that I'd seen made curiosity stronger than fear, so that I did not flee from the long moon-cast shadows that had daunted me when I first saw the Nameless City. In the twilight, I cleared another aperture with a new torch and crawled into it, finding more vague stones and symbols, though nothing more definite than the other temple had contained. The room was just as low, but much less broad, ending in a very narrow passage crowded with obscure and cryptical shrines. About these shrines I was prying, when the noise of a wind and my camel outside broke through the stillness and drew me forth to see what could have frightened the beast. The moon was gleaming vividly over the primitive ruins, lighting a dense cloud of sand that seemed blown by a strong but decreasing wind from some point along the cliff ahead of me. I knew it was this chilly, sandy wind which had disturbed the camel, and was about to lead him to a place of better shelter, when I chanced to glance up and saw that there was no wind atop the cliff. This astonished me, It made me fearful again. But I immediately recalled the sudden local winds that I had seen and heard before sunrise and sunset, and judged it was a normal thing. I decided it came from some rock fissure leading to a cave, and watched the troubled sand to trace to its source, soon perceiving that it came from the black orifice of a temple a long distance south of me, almost out of sight. Against the choking sand cloud, I plodded toward this temple, which as I neared it loomed larger than the rest, and showed a doorway far less clogged with caked sand. I would have entered had not the terrific force of the icy wind almost quenched my torch. It poured madly out of the dark door, sighing uncannily as it ruffled the sand and spread among the weird ruins. Soon it grew fainter, the sand grew more still, till finally all was at rest again. But a presence seemed stalking among the spectral stones of the city, and when I glanced at the moon it seemed to quiver as though mirrored in unquiet waters. I was more afraid than I could explain, but not enough to dull my thirst for wonder, for as soon as the wind was gone, I crossed into the dark chamber from which it had come. This temple, as I had fancied from the outside, was larger than either of those that I had visited before, and it was presumably a natural cavern, since it bore winds from some region beyond. Here I could stand quite upright, but saw that the stones and altars were as low as the other temples. On the walls and roof I beheld for the first time some traces of the pictorial art of the ancient race, curious curling streaks of paint that had almost faded or crumbled away. And on two of the pillars I saw with rising excitement a maze of well-fashioned curvilinear carvings. As I held my torch aloft, it seemed to me that the shape of the roof was too regular to be natural, and I wondered what the prehistoric cutters of stone had first worked upon. Their engineering skill must have been vast. Then a brighter flare of the fantastic flames showed that for which I had been seeking, the opening to those remoter abysses whence the sudden wind had blown, and I grew faint when I saw it was a small and plainly artificial door, chiseled into the solid rock. I thrust my torch within, beholding a black tunnel, with the roof arching low over a rough flight of very small, numerous, and steeply descending steps. I shall always see those steps in my dreams, for I came to learn what they meant. At the time, I hardly knew whether to call them steps or mere footholds in a precipitous descent. My mind was whirling with mad thoughts, and the words and warnings of the Arab prophets seemed to float across the desert from the lands that men knew to the Nameless City that men dare not know. Yet I hesitated only for a moment before advancing through the portal and commencing to climb cautiously through the steep passage, feet first, as though on a ladder. It is only in the terrible phantasms of drugs or delirium that any other man can have such a descent as mine. The narrow passage led infinitely down, like some hideous haunted well, and the torch I held above my head could not light the unknown depths toward which I was crawling. I'd lost track of the hours and forgot to consult my watch, though I was frightened when I thought of the distance I must be traversing. There were changes of direction and of steepness, and once I came to a long, low-level passage where I had to wriggle my feet first along the rocky floor, holding a torch at arm's length beyond my head. Hold up. There were changes of direction and of steepness, and at once I came to a long, low-level passage where I had to wriggle my feet first along the rocky floor, holding the torch at arm's length beyond my head. The place was not high enough for kneeling. After that, there were many more of the steep steps, and I was still scrambling down interminably when my failing torch died out. I do not think I noticed it at the time, for when I did notice it, I was still holding it above me as if it were ablaze. I was quite unbalanced with that instinct for the strange and the unknown, which had made me a wanderer upon earth and a haunter of far, ancient, and forbidden places. In the darkness there flashed before my mind fragments of my cherished treasury of demonic lore, sentences from Alzred, Mad Arab, paragraphs from the apocryphal nightmares of Damascus, and the infamous lines of the delirious Image du Monde of Gauthier de Metz, repeated queer extracts and muttered Afrasiab and the daemons that floated with him down the Oxus, later chanting over and over again the phrase from one of Lord Dunsany's tales: the unreverberate blackness of the abyss. Once, when the descent grew amazingly steep, I recited something in a sing-song voice from Thomas More until I feared to recite any more. A reservoir of darkness black, as witches' cauldrons are when filled, with moon drugs in the eclipse distilled, leaning to look if foot might pass down through that chasm I saw beneath. As far as vision could explore, the jetty sides as smooth as glass, looking as if just varnished o'er. But that dark pitch, the seat of death, throws out upon its slimy shore. Time had quite ceased to exist, when my feet again felt a level floor, and I found myself in a place slightly higher than the rooms and the two smaller temples so incalculably far above my head. I could not quite stand, but I could kneel upright, and in the dark I shuffled and crept hither and thither at random. I soon knew that I was in a narrow passage whose walls were lined with cases of wood having glass fronts, as in that Paleozoic and abysmal place. I felt of such things as polished wood and glass. I shuddered at the possible implications. The cases were apparently ranged along each side of the passage at regular intervals, and were oblong and horizontal, hideously like coffins in shape and size. When I tried to move 2 or 3 for further examination, I found they were firmly fastened. I saw that the passage was a long one, so floundered ahead rapidly in a creeping run that would have seemed horrible had any eye watched me in the blackness, crossing from side to side, occasionally, to feel of my surroundings, and be sure that the walls and rows of cases still stretched on. Man is so used to thinking visually that I almost forgot the darkness and pictured the endless corridor of wood and glass and its low-studded monotony, as though I saw it. And then, in a moment of indescribable emotion, I did see it. And just when my fancy merged into real sight, I cannot tell. but there came a gradual glow ahead. And all at once, I knew that I saw the dim outlines of the corridor and the cases revealed by some unknown subterranean phosphorescence. For a little while, all was exactly as I had imagined it. Since the glow was still very faint, but as I mechanically kept stumbling ahead into the stronger light, I realized that my fancy had been but feeble. This hall was no relic of crudity like the temples in the city above, but a monument of the most magnificent and exotic art. Rich, vivid, and daringly fantastic designs and pictures formed a continuous scheme of mural painting, whose lines and colors were beyond description. The cases were of a strange golden wood, with fronts of exquisite glass, and containing the mummified forms of creatures outreaching in grotesqueness the most chaotic dreams of man. To convey any idea of these monstrosities is impossible. They were of the reptile kind, with body lines suggesting sometimes the crocodile, sometimes the seal. But more often, nothing of which either the naturalist or the paleontologist ever heard. In size, they approximated a small man, and their forelegs bore delicate and evident feet curiously like human hands and fingers. But strangest of all were their heads, which possessed a contour violating all known biological principles. To nothing can such things be well compared. In one flash, I thought of comparisons as varied as the cat, the bulldog, the mythic satyr, and the human being. Not Jove himself had been so colossal and protuberant a forehead. Yet the horns and the noselessness and the alligator-like jaw placed these things outside of all established categories. I debated for a time the reality of the mummies, half suspecting they were artificial idols, but soon decided they were indeed some Paleogean species which had lived when the Nameless City was alive. To crown their grotesqueness, most of them were gorgeously enrobed in the costliest of fabrics, and lavishly laden with ornaments of gold, jewels, and unknown shining metals. The importance of these crawling creatures must have been vast, for they held first place among its wild designs on the frescoed walls and ceiling. With matchless skill had the artist drawn them in a world of their own, wherein they had cities and gardens fashioned to suit their dimension, and I could not help but think that their pictured history was allegorical, perhaps shewing the progress of the race that worshipped them. These creatures, I said to myself, were to the men of the timeless city what that she-wolf was to Rome, or some totem beast is to a tribe of Native Americans. The word he used there was Indians, but I know what he means. Holding this view, I could trace roughly a wonderful epic of the Nameless City, a tale of a mighty seacoast metropolis that ruled the world before Africa rose out of the waves, and of its struggles as the sea shrank away and the desert crept into the fertile valley that held it. I saw wars and triumphs, its troubles and defeats, and afterwards, its terrible fight against the desert, when thousands of its people, here represented in allegory by grotesque reptiles, were driven to chisel their way down through the rocks in some marvelous manner to another world whereof their prophet had told them. It was all vividly weird and realistic, and its connection with the awesome descent I had made was unmistakable. I even recognized the passages. As I crept along the corridor toward the brighter light, I saw later stages of the painted epic. The leave-taking of the race that had dwelt in the Nameless City, and the valley around, for 10 million years. The race whose souls shrank from the quitting scenes their bodies had known for so long, where they had settled as nomads in the earth's youth, hewing the virgin rock in those primal shrines, at which they never ceased to worship. Now that light was better, I studied the pictures more closely, and remembering that the strange reptiles must represent the unknown men, pondered upon the customs of the Nameless City. Many things were peculiar and inexplicable. The civilization, which included a written alphabet, had seemingly risen to a higher order than those immeasurably later civilians of Egypt and Chaldea. Yet there were curious omissions. I could, for example, find no pictures to represent deaths or funeral customs, save such as were related to wars, violence, and plagues. And I wondered at the reticence shown concerning natural death. It was as though an ideal of immortality had been fostered as a cheering illusion. Still nearer the end of the passage were painted scenes of the utmost picturesqueness and extravagance. Contrasted views of the Nameless City and its desertion and growing ruin, and of the strange new realm of paradise to which the race had hewed its way through the stone. In these views, the city and the desert valley were shewn always by a moonlight, golden nimbus hovering over the fallen walls, and half revealing the splendid perfection of former times, shown spectrally and elusively by the artist. The paradisal scenes were almost too extravagant to be believed, portraying a hidden world of eternal day, filled with glorious cities and ethereal hills and valleys. At the very last, I thought I saw signs of an artistic anticlimax. The paintings were less skillful, much more bizarre than ever the wildest of earlier scenes. Even the wildest of earlier scenes. They seemed to record a slow decadence of the ancient stock, coupled with growing ferocity toward the outside world, from which it was driven by the desert. The forms of the people, always represented by sacred reptiles, appeared to be gradually wasting away, though their spirit is shewn hovering above the ruins by moonlight gained in proportion. Emaciated priests, displayed as reptiles in ornate robes, cursed the upper air and all who breathed it, and in one terrible final scene, shewed a primitive-looking man, perhaps a pioneer of ancient Iran, the city of pillars, torn to pieces by members of the elder race. I remember how the Arabs fear the Nameless City, and was glad that beyond this place the grey walls and ceiling were bare. As I viewed the pageant of mural history, I approached very closely the end of a low-ceilinged hall, and was aware of a gate through which came all of the illuminating phosphorescence. Creeping up to it, I cried aloud in transcendent amazement at what lay beyond. For instead of other and brighter chambers, there was only an illimitable void of uniform radiance, such as one might fancy when gazing down from the peak of Mount Everest upon a sea of sunlit mist. Behind me was a passage so cramped but I could not stand up upright in it. Before me was an infinity of subterranean effulgence. Reaching down from the passage in the abyss was the head of a steep flight of steps. Small, numerous steps like those of the black passages I had traversed. But after a few feet, the glowing vapors concealed everything. Swung back open against the left-hand wall of the passage was a massive door of brass, incredibly thick and decorated with fantastic bas-reliefs, which I could have closed shut. The whole inner world of white which could have closed shut the whole inner world of light away from the vaults and passages of rock. I looked at the steps and, for the nonce, dared not try them. I touched the open brass door and could not move it. Then I sank prone to the stone floor, my mind aflame with prodigious reflections which not even a death-like exhaustion could banish. As I lay still with closed eyes, free to ponder, many things I had lightly noted in the frescoes came back to me with new and terrible significance. Scenes representing the Nameless City in its heyday, the vegetation of the valley around it, and the distant lands with which its merchants traded. The allegory of the crawling creatures puzzled me by its universal prominence, and I wondered that it would be so closely followed in a pictured history of such importance. In the frescoes, the Nameless City had been shewn in proportions fitted to the reptiles. I wondered what its real proportions and magnificence had been, and reflected a moment on certain oddities I had noticed in the ruins. I thought curiously of the lowness of the primal temples and of the underground corridor, which were doubtless hewn out of deference to the reptile deities there honored, though it perforce reduced the worshippers to crawling. Perhaps the very rites here involved crawling and imitation of the creatures. No religious theory, however, could easily explain why the level passages in that awesome descent should be as low as the temples, or lower, since one could not even kneel in it. As I thought of the crawling creatures, whose hideous mummified forms were so close to me, I felt a new throb of fear. Mental associations are curious, and I shrank from the idea that except for the poor primitive man torn to pieces in the last painting, mine was the only human form amidst many relics and symbols of primordial life. But, as always in my strange and roving existence, wonder soon drove out fear. The luminous abyss which it might contain presented a problem worthy of the greatest explorer. That a weird world of mystery lay far down that flight of peculiarly small steps that I could not doubt, and I hoped to find there those human memorials which the painted corridor had failed to give. The frescoes had pictured unbelievable cities and valleys in this lower realm. My fancy dwelt on the rich and colossal ruins that awaited me. My fears indeed concerned the past rather than the future. Not even physical horror of my position in that cramped corridor of the dead reptiles and antediluvian frescoes, miles below the world I knew and faced by another world of eerie light and mist, could match the lethal dread I felt, the abysmal antiquity of the scene and its soul, an ancientness so vast, that measurement is feeble, seemed to leer down from from the primal stones and rock-hewn temples of the Nameless City, while the very latest of the astounding maps and frescoes shew oceans and continents that man has forgotten, with only here and there some vaguely familiar oddities. Of what could have happened in the geological ages since the painting ceased and the death-hating race resentfully succumbed to decay, no man might say. Life had once teemed in these caverns, and in the luminous realm beyond. Now I was alone, with vivid relics, and I trembled to think of the countless ages through which these relics had kept a silent, deserted vigil. Suddenly there came another burst of that acute fear which had intermittently seized me over ever since I first saw the terrible valley and the Nameless City under a cold moon. And, despite my exhaustion, I found myself starting frantically to a sitting posture and gazing back along the black corridor of the tunnels that rose to the outer world. My sensations were like those which had made me shun the Nameless City at night, and were as inexplicable as they were poignant. In another moment, however, I received a still greater shock, in the form of a definite sound, the first which had broken the utter silence of these tomb-like depths. It was a deep, low moaning, as of distant throng of condemned spirits, and came from the direction in which I was staring. Its volume rapidly grew, till soon it reverberated frightfully through the low passage, and at the same time I became conscious of an increasing draught of cold air, likewise flowing from the tunnels in the city above. The touch of this air seemed to restore my balance, for I instantly recalled the sudden gusts which had risen round the mouth of the abyss each sunset and sunrise, one of which had indeed revealed the hidden tunnels to me. I looked at my watch and saw the sunrise was near, so I braced myself to resist the gale that was sweeping down to its cavern home as it swept forth that evening. My fear again waned low, since a natural phenomenon tends to dispel broodings over the unknown. More and more madly poured the shrieking, moaning night wind into the gulf of the inner earth. I dropped prone again, and clutched vainly at the floor for fear of being swept bodily through the open gate to the phosphorescent abyss. Such fury I had not expected. As I grew aware of an actual slipping of my form toward the abyss, I was beset by 1,000 new terrors of apprehension and imagination. The malignancy of the blast awakened incredible fancies. Once more I compared myself shudderingly to the only human image in that frightful corridor, the man who was torn to pieces by the nameless race. For in the fiendish clawing of the swirling currents, there seemed to abide a vindictive rage all the stronger, because it was largely impotent. I think I screamed frantically near the last. I was almost mad. But if I did so, my cries were lost in the hell-born babble of the howling wind wraiths. I managed to crawl against the murderous, invisible torrent, but I could not even hold my own, as I was pushed slowly and inexorably toward the unknown world. Finally, reason must have wholly snapped, for I fell to babbling over and over that inexplicable couplet of the mad Arab Al-Zarar, who dreamed of the Nameless City. That is not dead which eternal lie, and with strange aeons even death may die. Only the grim, brooding desert gods know what really took place, what indescribable struggles and scrambles in the dark I endured, or what Abaddon guided me back to life, where I must always remember and shiver in the night wind till oblivion, or worse, claims me. Monstrous, unnatural, colossal was the thing, too far beyond all the ideas of man to be believed except in the silent, damnable small hours of the morning, when one cannot sleep. They said the fury of the rushing blast was infernal, cacodemonical, and the voices were hideous, with the pent-up viciousness of desolate eternities. Presently these voices, while still chaotic before me, seemed to my beating brain to take articulate form behind me, and down there, in the grave of unnumbered aeon-dead antiquities, leagues below the dawn-lit world of men, I heard the ghastly cursing and snarling of the strange-tongued fiends. Turning, I saw outlined against the luminous aether of the abyss that could not be seen against the dark of the corridor, a nightmare horde of rushing devils, hate distorted, grotesquely panoplied, half-transparent devils of a race no man might mistake, the crawling reptiles of the Nameless City. As the wind died away, I was plunged into the gold-pooled darkness of the earth's bowels, for behind the last of the creatures, the great brazen door clanged shut with a deafening peal of metallic music whose reverberations swelled out to the distant world to hail the rising sun as Memnon hails it from the banks of the Nile. And that's where it ends. That is where my voice begins to die. Begins is a kind word. It's been dying for a minute. But yes, we do this every week, except when I fuck up the schedule, in which we do this on a different day of the week. I just sit here and read stories, and chat gets to choose what I read a lot of the time. It's a chill time. But I crave the sweet release of sleep. I am tired. I hiked several miles today, so I'm like, meh. Nevertheless, thank you all for joining me. It's always a pleasure to hang out with y'all. I'll probably do Nier Automata. Oh god, no. Nier Replicant tomorrow. I might do more Cthulhu. That game is fun. That last rod of Cthulhu is fucking hilarious. That was a good rod. In the meantime, though, do not drink or eat. Oh god, I can't do it in that order. Do not eat or drink any questionable substances. Make smart decisions. Do not die. Dying is absolutely forbidden, and I will see all of you wonderful people at a later time. Take care, guys. Good night. Night, night, night. Where the hell are my lupine uncles? Come on. Go. Oh, jeez. There we go.